As folks continue to answer our prompt, just kind of getting us ready for our session today, I'm going to start going through the slides. So, just in case anybody new came in, welcome. Please share your name and where you're joining us from the chat and answer our fun little themed prompt. What do you think teens and tweens should know about data? As a reminder, our session today is called Building Data Literacy Through Hands-On Activities, Part 1. We do have a Part 2 coming up. We'll talk about that in a second. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm happy to start today's session with some brief welcoming remarks. For those of you who are here for the first time, we offer a brief introduction of the Revise Center. So, the Revise Center, us, is an NSF-funded resource center. We share NSF updates pertaining to informal STEM education, or ISE, as well as field-wide opportunities and resources focused on advancing ISE. From sharing resources via our newsletter to hosting informational sessions that support the broader ISE community, such as today's webinar, Revise strives to make meaningful advancements across the informal science education field. Before we dive into today's session, we want to share just a few technical details about the session. Next slide. Perfect. So, in keeping with our privacy policy, we will remove any AI, that's artificial intelligence, note-taking apps that attend the session, including but not limited to Otter AI, Firefly AI, Fathom AI, etc. We do this for data privacy purposes. If you need to access our full privacy policy, we have the link. You can look that up at informalscience.org/privacy. As a note, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on our website as soon as it's finalized. For those who may need it, closed captioning is also available. To enable closed captioning, click on the CC icon in the meeting controls toolbar. This toolbar is usually located at the bottom of the webinar window. Once closed captions are enabled, they will be displayed in a new closed caption box, and you should be able to click and drag caption box to move them and position them where you want to on your meeting window. Finally, all attendees can leverage the chat feature. We encourage you to leverage the chat feature. Please take a moment to identify the chat icon in your meeting controls toolbar. You can access that feature by clicking on the respective icons. Please submit questions or comments via the chat. All right, just a few engagement norms before we jump in. So this webinar is actually a part of Revise Center's greater commitment to providing resources to the ISE field. And our goal is that this webinar offers a harassment-free environment and a welcoming experience for all of our attendees. As such, we offer our session engagement norms to guide our engagements during today's session. So here's 3 of them. Your story, your choice. You all can decide which stories you want to share and how you want to share them. Reciprocity and accountability. We just ask that everyone interact in ways that are respectful to others around them. And then finally, conversations end in a comma, not a period. Our conversations obviously do not end after this session, and we really encourage you all to keep contemplating and tinkering with the ideas and the conversations that we have in this space today. With your support and participation, we aim to move beyond compliance with these guiding principles to facilitate a welcoming, accessible, and shared webinar space. Whew. Okay, some of our upcoming events. Looking ahead, we have so many good things, y'all. On May 11th, we have, and that's Monday, I believe, we are going to host a webinar with the NSF program officers to explore funding opportunities related to informal science. This is under the NSF STEM K-12 program. Then on May 18th, we will host part 2 of this series called Building Data Literacy Through Hands-On Activities, part 2, surprise, surprise. And stay tuned for a webinar on our next featured topic, which is storytelling through film and media to deepen public engagement with science. That one is going to be June 18th. And I think that's going to be our last one for the spring season, and then we're going to move into summer. Time is flying. We will be sharing more details about these in the coming weeks. Keep an eye out for our newsletter, check out our social media, etc. Okay, let's get started. Okay, oh my gosh, my picture is so big. Okay, so I don't even know if I said my name. Hey y'all, I'm Tiara Tanksley. And I am so excited to welcome today's speakers. I've been reading all of y'all papers. So many questions. I work with young people as well, so I'm really looking forward to this. So I'm going to actually just hand the mic, the virtual mic, over to our first group of presenters. Dr. Buller, do you want to kick us off?
Okay, hi everybody. First, I want to thank Kim and your team at Revise for giving us the opportunity to share our project with you. And I'm here with my colleagues. I've got, you can probably see Mark Rosen and Irene Lopatovska here. There were three of us worked on this project for a few years. I guess I need to share my slides and let's see what I can do. Okay. Can everybody see? It all good? Yeah? Okay.
Great.
Good. Okay. So this project was funded by NSF. Thank you very much, NSF, and AISL. It was called Data Literacy with, for, and by Youth, and we were exploring how teens co-design after-school programs, data literacy library programs specifically, as sites of critical data practice. And why isn't my thing advancing? Here we go. In this project, we explored how young people enact critical data literacies if they were given the opportunity, as in this case, through informal after-school activities at the public library. And in this project, the teens both tested, provided feedback, and developed their own novel approaches to data literacy learning at the public library. And the project was grounded on the principles and practices of co-design, giving teens an active role in the design process. And now we started with some ideas about what exactly is data literacy. And we think it's more than computation and statistics and math and coding. It does include that, but it's more. We thought of it as a new liberal art that includes humanistic reasoning skills, socially situated practices, and ethical considerations. In other words, a lot of critical thinking. And we thought that data, and still think, data literacy is about knowing how to read data so that you can use data to read the world. So we were thinking about critical data literacy, and a person who is critical about data considers the effect of data practices on people and society and asks why specific actions are being taken with data, not just what and how. And we've thought that, these critical approaches can arise out of personal and meaningful interactions with data. That when it's personal and meaningful, it's close to home. And when it's in your own life, it makes you actually ask some interesting questions about data. So co-design with teens can help reveal what is meaningful to teens. We wanted to know what is meaningful to them, what's personal and meaningful. It's a powerful means to reveal a youth point of view, to help create learning environments that facilitate critical perspectives on data. So we did this we ran these, we call them data labs. We ran them online and in person at the public library. And they were not like one-shot workshops. They were a series of associated workshops working with the same teens over 5, 6, 7, and 8 sessions. And what we did was basically there was a bit of an intro, the first session, and the middle sessions were sort of making and brainstorming. And the last one was trying out and sort of feedback and evaluation. And we had 4 series, and you can see here from 2021 to 2022. I will point out here under the column type of data, we actually were working with 2 forms of data. In the first 2 sessions, we were thinking about personal digital data, think social media. And the second one we were thinking about and playing with civic data from, say, data repositories. In our case, we were looking at New York's open data. So here's some quick lessons from the project. I know we don't have much time. So, one, when you're working with teens in an after-school environment, especially if you're trying to co-design with them, the whole thing must not be school. And the teens said that the kinds of activities they wanted and that they designed must not be school. It has to be playful, a lot of gamification. And the other piece is there has to be a strong after school social vibe, because basically, why do kids go to a public library? Guess what? It's because they want to hang out together. Not a surprise. We were thinking in terms of data literacies, plural, because it turns out the type of data matters when you're designing data literacy activities hands-on with teens or children. As I mentioned, in this case, we worked with what we thought of as two forms of data. And so we're really talking about data literacies, plural, and therefore a plug and play approach is not really possible. Data activities must be designed to suit the context. And thirdly, our third big lesson, I guess maybe we could say, is that we thought, because there's clearly a power situation here with adults and teens, and we thought that, and we were trying to be conscious of our roles together, and we called for conscious co-design. So after design sessions, many, not all, we asked ourselves, in what ways did teens participate? And if we had to, we adapted for the next session. And we even at some point had a checklist. We didn't use it the whole time, but we did develop a co-design checklist. We had no formal predetermined 6-week plan for the data sessions. Each session was determined by ideas generated by teens in the previous session. So it was always evolving. We had many breakout groups for teens, and it seemed in small groups there was nice interaction between them. And basically, on our part, an awareness that levels of participation can change and grow. So there's no one right way to co-design and have participatory design. And quickly, I'm sorry I can't show you so many more activities. I'll show you a few. Some sample data literacy activities, tested and designed by teens. Basically, this was an online activity where we were trying to uncover assumptions in data profiles. So the teens established 5 metadata categories of things that teens like, and then we asked them to fill it in with data. You could see, like under favorite anime, they put names of anime, and that's so on and so forth. And then we asked them to take you could see the directions here. Pick one sticky note from each of those 5 categories and add it to the board here, the whiteboard here. And then collectively, we talked about what did they infer from this person. And you could see they made assumptions that this was a tall, muscular person and likes action heroes. And basically, we're asking them to, ask themselves why. How do these inferences from selective data come up? And then on the side of civic data, we practiced something what we called interrogating data, and it was a multi-week development. But we began by asking the teens, what do I care about in my community? And they came up with some topics. And from that, we all looked for data sets, and then we kind of explored. And we used this sort of interrogation tool here. Here's one data set, the NYC Green Thumb Community Gardens. And the questions are where some of the critical thinking arises. And they looked at the data, and one teen asked, so why does Staten Island only have 4 green spaces and other places have more? And then this is when we looked at the evictions data set. Here again, we were, the questions, you could see some critical questions emerging, like, why are people being evicted? And one teen asked, is there a marshal that has a significant amount of evictions? And when I looked over the transcripts, basically one of the teens said, how come they aren't recording empathy data, which was an interesting question. And finally, last example is that basically this is a teen who wanted to design an online game in Minecraft using motor vehicle collision data. So essentially, this would be an activity she says other teens would love, and they would learn about how to use data. So did the teens enjoy this? As one teen said in the final exit survey, I would like for you guys to know that I absolutely love this internship and I wish to come back again. So yes, they liked it. And as we wrap up, I want to point you to our website where we have activities and resource guides. And please go and visit it and you'll see. And I want to acknowledge the young people, the library staff, and the research assistants who participated in these studies because their contributions are invaluable. And thank you to the NSF. And if anybody wants to reach out to us, here's our emails. We are all at Pratt. But I'm going to go back to the website so you can get your hands on the URL. So thank you.
That was awesome. Yeah, I was like scrambling to write down the website because I was like, I need this. And but the data. And what happens when they find there's a dearth in some of these areas, right? Um, okay, so thank you all. We're going to start transitioning to the next project. As we do that, we have another waterfall question in the chat, and it's just what stood out to you, right? What's something in this last panel that caught your attention that you want to know more about, that you have questions about, or that you maybe want to do in your own program? Because Lord knows, I'm about to do some of these in my program, okay, for real. Okay, I'm going to pass the virtual mic over to Dr. Roberts. Take it away.
Hi, all. Thanks so much for being here. This will actually be a lovely transition because we're asking some of the same questions with students in ours. So I'm Jessica Roberts. I'm from Georgia Tech, the School of Interactive Computing. I'm presenting on behalf of my collaborators here, Alex Endert, who's a professor in the visualization department, also in interactive computing, and Jayma Kaval and Sabrina Grossman from the Center for Education Integrating Mathematics, Science, and Computing, or SEISMIC, here at Georgia Tech. And this is an NSF AISL-funded project called Air Pollution Visualizations for Promoting Data Literacy with Middle Schoolers and the Public, where we are looking really at two big key ideas. One is data visualization literacy, which we know helps people understand, data and in different ways. Visualization in particular is a way to understand data. Data literacy is critical for full literacy, but we know that it's very difficult, especially for novices when you're not familiar with the data. And on the other hand, we have air quality and environmental data. Most people have some sort of passing knowledge of this, but it's a very complex, a very data-rich topic. And it turns out there's not very many resources from the very entry-level novice options that we'll talk about in a minute and the expert data that we'll use. So what we're trying to investigate in this project is there a symbiotic relationship? Can we use visualization literacy to help build air quality and environmental literacy, and air quality to give the content and motivation to learn about data literacy? Now, in the grant, we're doing this through two different mechanisms. One is a public engagement kiosk that I'm not going to talk about today. The other one is a middle school science camp where we really get kids hands-on with the data. And this camp we call it the DVE, or Data Visualization in the Environment Summer Camp. We've run it 2 years so far. We have our final camp coming up this June. We aim for about 20 middle schoolers who come into our campus at Georgia Tech for a 2-week fully funded experience where they do all sorts of different activities in and around Georgia Tech's campus, with a culminating project of they should be able to use data to tell a story about their community or their environment. And we're very broad with environment. We let them choose the topic that they're most interested in. So for that, they need to be able to recognize what data is, where it comes from. They need to understand air quality and air pollution, which is where we start talking about visualization, and then have sort of the language to talk about visualization. So the hands-on activity that I'm going to talk about in a minute is about the air quality index specifically, but to give you a little bit of primer to help you get into the space. Okay, so you probably are familiar with this air quality index, or AQI. You might see it as a little dot on your map when you open up a map app on your phone. If you open up the weather app, you might be able to go and actually see a map of the air quality index. It's got color coding, it's got some interpretive text. If you care enough to scroll down, you can actually this is relatively new, you can actually see what the different pollutants are. And you can see how many parts per billion there are of carbon monoxide in the air on this particular day, which is not actually a very helpful way if you can't remember what is the useful amount or a harmful amount of carbon dioxide. So a few decades ago, scientists created the scale, the air quality index, where all of these numbers from the raw readings from the sensors are translated into a normalized 500-point scale. So everything, if it's according to how harmful it is to humans. So each of the pollutants is going to be a different level, is going to be a different actual amount is going to be related to a different color and a different AQI number. So each pollutant value gets an AQI value. And we have this is a screenshot from one of the kiosk portion where we have a cute animation that explains this. But basically, all of the pollutants then have their AQI value, and the highest AQI value becomes the AQI for the day, and the whatever pollutant is the highest value, that is called the driver pollutant or the primary pollutant. So in this example, ozone is 136, and so the AQI is going to be reported as 136. And just because the way AQI is reported, we don't know if ozone is 136, everything else could be 135, or everything else could be zero, or anywhere in between, as in this example. So it's not some sort of aggregation of all of these numbers, which is a common misconception that we found not just in students, but in the general population too. So we're trying to figure out, how do we convey that, and how do we teach these kids what they're actually looking at, and what they're doing when we're talking about air quality data. So we used candy. We have this driver pollutant and the air quality index that I just talked about, and we use Skittles as a metaphor for figuring those out. So the driver pollutant, we came up with the concept of a driver Skittle. So we gave them a bag of Skittle, and the driver Skittle is the color that there are the most of in the bag, and the Skittles color index then is the count of that Skittle. Now, this is something we do in the second or third day of camp every year, and they by that point have already been working with what we call the DPV, or design or domain purpose visual framework for designing visualization. So if you are taking a visualization course in college, you will have a language or talking about like the visualization design principles. And we know that design is really important for how a chart is being read, but we don't actually teach that very well to K-12 in most situations. So we created this framework to help scaffold students in figuring out how to decide the colors, what the purpose of their chart is, like, so what chart type should they use, and all of that. So they've been working with that, and we try to take the Skittles colors index idea and have them apply the DPV framework for it. So first they count all their Skittles, they fill out their charts, come up with what is their driver Skittle, what's their Skittles color index. And then we try to have them figure out, okay, what's your big idea you want to convey? And then they're moving the Skittles around on their desk and putting them into different kinds of chart types to kind of see the data patterns. And then from that, we're having them talk about their big idea. They share out what they're doing and why they decided this particular representation. And they go from those the actual physical pieces to drawings of them on their worksheet, and try to decide, why did they make these design decisions, and sort of what are the choices that they made for the different ideas. And then from there, once they have these concepts down, then we go back to air quality and air pollution. And we use this bag of air metaphor. So like, okay, you had this bag of Skittles and you found your Skittles color index. Now your air quality index is doing the same thing. And so, can we transition that way? So then they can start to use the DBV framework to visualize air quality data, and we kind of go through there. So what we saw in these couple of years of the grants is that kids are trying out different kinds of chart types. We're a lot of column graphs right now, a few different pie charts and other things, but we're trying to figure out how we can get them to be talking about different kinds of big ideas, different chart types, and then what the purposes of those are, to really get them more familiar with the DPV framework and what the big ideas are that they should be doing. And then also have them, have a way to like a more tangible conception of what this air quality index is. I couldn't leave this without showing some of the projects that they end up with, but over the next 2 weeks, then they have to decide, like, what's a question, a data set that I can find in my community, and then they have to go through and find data for it, and they work in different ways to represent that data in a public presentation. So all of these resources, we have some preliminary ones on our website right now, but we are working on getting these packaged. This is the main work of this last year of the camp. We're working to package them and get them really available and ready for download for any educators, whether in a summer camp or in a classroom, to be able to use this. And with that, I will give a shout out to the amazing team of students. I saw a couple of the students who are on this project. I saw on the call already, and of course, the findings group also is our external evaluator and have been very helpful with all of this process. So I will leave it at that and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. Man, I love those youth projects. The one that caught my eye, all of them. First of all, I just came from Atlanta, so the Atlanta trash. I was like, we need this data.
Mhm.
Um, and then what was the other one? The streetlights one. I'm so interested to know what they found, what their questions were, because there's a lot to unpack about where streetlights are, where they're not, all that good stuff. Um, Okay, so thanks, Valeria. This might be you or Kim putting folks back on the stage, but I want to welcome you all back just for an open discussion. So during this time, I have a couple prepared questions. I have a couple random questions that popped up as I was listening, and then I'm also going to invite our listeners to put any questions that they want answered in the chat. Okay, so first and foremost, I am wondering it feels like okay, there's a lot of moving pieces here for these types of like really engaging projects. Um, I know you guys talked about like some of the challenges, but I think a lot of practitioners, myself included, like I don't even know what to like expect sometimes, like what could possibly go wrong. Like, I don't know. It's there, the landscape is immense for what could go wrong, right? Or maybe not wrong, just differently than what you expected. And in both of your projects, you're kind of constructing things, Dr. Buller, you were saying like as you were teaching it. Can you talk a little bit about some challenges that you faced and how you overcame them? Because maybe that can help those of us in the audience who are practitioners as well.
When you say you're a practitioner, you're a teacher. Is that it?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, K-12.
Okay. All right. So I'll say something, and Irene and Mark can also join in. Challenges. Oh my goodness, we had so many challenges. The beginning was that it started in COVID, so we had to totally redesign the project. Put that aside, anyways, and think on the fly fast. And then I think it's just a situation of running a program in a public library because the idea is public libraries, but there's over 16,000 of them in the United States, right? It's a huge informal learning resource for the country, and so we want to have more solid pedagogy for this space. And when you're designing any interaction programming with youth in the context of a drop-in place, they don't have to be there. They're not getting graded. You have to have fun. It's like they're teens, it better be fun so it was like we were always had that in mind, even though we actually we did have some interns come, the teen interns, but they still didn't need to be there. They were library interns. Um, you know, so I don't know. That was to me, it was the biggest challenge, was to keep them engaged, bring them back because it was multi-session, like, that sort of thing. And then, and what we were asking the teens was like, here's some ideas we have. You want to test them out, but also, can you guys design stuff that you think other teens will like? Because guess what? It's a library and they don't have to be here. So I don't know. Irene and Mark, do you guys want to speak to the challenges you saw?
One of the challenges that was somewhat noted in some of the questions we received prior to the sessions was the balance between adults and children. They're not like children, they don't think they're children, but this balance of like early on we discovered that they might not know enough to lead in that, really truly co-design type of way. But in giving them ideas where to even begin, you don't want to overstep as well and take too much control. So this kind of very gentle balance between giving them the power, but also giving them the direction where to take that design session was was probably one of the challenges that I think we managed to handle okay, right? But yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to add.
That's okay. I appreciated the sentiment shared by one of the young people in the program that this can't be like school, and which says a lot about what school is, right, for so many of our young folks. But yeah, like it needs to be fun, it needs to be about hanging out, it needs to be, kikiing, as we say. Okay, so this idea about the intergenerational learning is actually really important because a lot of folks, one, have a hard time letting go of control, right? Um, this is like the biggest thing. I'm going to come into the classroom. There's going to be 30 littles. I did elementary school. How do I make sure that they are empowered, but they're learning and they're staying on task, but they're safe, but there's like so many things. So I'm wondering about how you all negotiated the like reciprocal learning piece that you were just speaking about, Irene. That there is a sentiment that perhaps like if this is the young folks' first time learning this content, do they feel prepared to talk to adults or community members as experts and like yeah, if you all could speak a little bit, especially with the air quality. I mean, I don't even feel like I can speak about that. How did you all negotiate that?
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
for ours, I mean, with air quality, I think that last thing you said was exactly the right thing. The teacher didn't necessarily know about air quality, and also our teachers that we've worked with so far have not had a lot of experience with data visualization teaching. They're science or math teachers, but they're not actually trained in visualization. And one of the decisions that we just made for this camp is to use Tableau software, which is a professional grade software, and it is a lot for the teachers to learn and then for the students to learn. And we looked at some of these sort of like scaled down options out there. And what we really wanted to do was give kids, and this speaks to the empowerment, give them this software that is difficult, that is professional grade, that they could actually go and say, like, I can do this, in terms of professional training. And that was really empowering to them. Like, I'm using something that grownups use is is a really important part of that decision of why we chose this for the camp. But it does have a lot of challenges in terms of making the teacher feel comfortable with how to teach them in that. So we're still working on making the professional development resources for the teacher be what they need to be. And that's really the focus this summer. The last 2 summers, we've had our team there like ready to go and jump in anytime there's troubleshooting needs. But now, as we're trying to let this kind of go out into the world, we need to make sure that those resources are up. But having the teacher be in a position which they knew going in, where like they're learning a new software themselves and they're learning a new content area themselves, and then the students being able to kind of learn along with them, it kind of made it just a lot of fun. And so we didn't have the power balance as badly as we might have been concerned at the beginning.
Yeah. I would say because we were explicitly working with the idea of co-design, we were conscious from minute one of the power, imbalance, balance. We actually wrote a paper in 2021, and I think our first or second year of the project. It's called The Meaning of Participation in Co-Design with Children and Youth. We ourselves investigated what it meant. And one of the sort of, I guess, a conceptual framework, at least in my mind, was to see these data labs and sessions as like joint learning. Like it wasn't, that like Irene said, there's a piece where there's some STEM information that they just don't know. And we had to do a little teaching to get them there. But on the other hand, we were learning a lot. It was like a back and forth, like pretty, we were scaffolding each other, in a sort of a Lab and Wenger kind of community of learning. And so that was just like, a mental model that we brought into it.
Thank you for that. Yeah, across both of these projects, I'm thinking about what it takes, like the pedagogical knowledge, but also the like nimbleness, right? in addition to the content or disciplinary knowledge that you have to build, right? Whether it's being comfortable learning Tableau. Listen, I was supposed to learn that in grad school. I tried. I was like, yeah, we gotta do something else. So shout out to them for learning that. And then also just being able to build something on the fly, right? Like the kids come in one day and they say, I want to do this, right? And the staff who's there got to figure it out, right? Sometimes that's scary because, for me, I do an AI class, and my students will come up with something that I haven't seen yet. They were talking about, deepfakes they saw on social media. And now I'm pivoting, but I don't know that much about deepfakes, So exploring that with them, it takes a certain level of like comfort, and I think you all are really unpacking that of like it's something also about the like power. It's us letting go of like control of learning, being open to reciprocal learning, and then allowing for this like yeah, scientific agency to develop amongst everyone. Okay, so I did see a question in the chat. We have a comment that says, I'm curious in what ways the students applied their learning to their lives in general. Oh, okay. At school, at home, etc. Were there spillover effects?
Is that directed at both projects?
Everybody.
Yeah. Well, I would say we weren't measuring that, long term. We had no capacity to do that, unfortunately.
We have as part of our project a sort of an extension. So we have the teacher who comes in, and I don't know if I talked about this, but we have a teacher coming in for a 6-week internship with us, and then 2 weeks of that is running the summer camp, and then we have a stipend to have the teacher continue to do an after-school program or before-school program at their school, and have either the same students or other students come and participate in that. We've had kind of varying success with that. It turns out once basketball season starts, those kids are going to basketball practice, and we had and then of course, once testing starts, don't even think about having an after school program. So we were starting to get a little bit like they did sort of similar projects in this after school program. She was combining it with the teacher the first year had already a huge plan of what she wanted to do. She had a community garden that she already had additional funding for. So she was using it to the DPV framework to kind of help the kids like visualize their data of how their plants were growing and stuff. So hopefully we can get more on that in this next year too. But yeah, it's really hard to know. What we were looking at in terms of over the 2 weeks, seeing how students were changing in the sort of variety and complexity of the charts that they're talking about using, and their ability to have the terms and the language to critique their own and their classmates' visualizations. So we hope that that means that they are able to leave our camp and be able to continue to do that, but we don't have longitudinal data yet either.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this in my own work. Dr. Rob Benjamin has this notion of like, virality, and how these concepts, like we can make change in these like small ways, and that change can spread. Like when we're thinking about scale, instead of scale coming like top down, that we can think about spread. Something can, be joy is contagious, things like that. And I've been thinking, people have been asking me about like, what are the long-term effects? What are the spillover effects? And it's often hard for me to answer because one, I have them in informal spaces, so I don't follow them back to school. And I usually have them for one summer. But when I started to think about like that spread, something interesting I saw was that like one of the markers of success was young people saying like, oh, I told my grandma about this. Oh my God, I was talking to my auntie after the program about like the AI we were talking about, and like more and more I was hearing about them telling family members or friends or their social media. And I feel like that was some of that spread, right? Like I still haven't measured it, but there's all these interesting ways that it was popping up. A couple kids made like groups in school, and so I think that's one of the I don't know, like I wish I could capture that because I know that all these programs are doing things like that, right? Like when you really impact the kids, like it spreads. There are spillover effects. It's just we don't have the time or the budget or whatever else to track it. Um, let's see, I thought I saw another comment here. Um, okay, so y'all are designing these programs, curriculum, interventions, etc., public air quality visuals. I don't, I'm like, I don't even have the language. So what are some like maybe design insights that you have for folks, if you have them, for like people who are wanting to make things like in libraries, right? I think there's a really big interest in our population here in this webinar who are in spaces like aquariums, zoos, libraries, and just wanting to know how do you, like, what are some of these design principles to make this happen?
That's a good question. I mean, we talk a lot with the kiosk part of our project. We're talking a lot about the difference between an informational display, like you can get information about air quality on your phone, on your smartwatch, all these different places, versus an educational display. Like I would be curious how many people on this call honestly would have been able to tell me what that AQI number actually stands for. And it was we did a survey at the beginning. This whole project started way back in 2020, and we surveyed a whole lot of kind of overeducated people in the Georgia Tech community, so people with master's degree and above, and very few felt like they were confident in knowing what that number was. And this was where we realized that there just wasn't much in the middle to kind of explain from that AQI number to, on the other hand, when we talk to our atmospheric scientists who are collaborators, we talk about like, well, what is this in AQI terms? They're like, I have no idea. So there's really not that much bridging in between. So what we're trying to do is not make the public all atmospheric scientists, and but we do want to have a little like something more in between, so that when we ask the public to say like, do they support this particular policy, or I have this much in terms of resources I can do, should I plant a million trees, or should I buy an electric vehicle, or we want people to be able to make these decisions, and they don't have the resources to do it. So it's not just about telling them today's AQI is 36, green means go play outside. We want them to be able to start to think a little bit more about the bigger issues and where these pollutants come from and know what they're doing. So we haven't figured that out yet of how to make it educational in this little snippet of an interaction that they're not seeing in a museum when they're there to learn. They might see outside. We're kind of wheeling it out into public spaces and seeing what happens there.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot about another. I think they might be AISL down in Anaheim, California, where they're doing it's Dr. Andreas Bustamante and June An. They're doing like these public science displays, and it'll be like in grocery stores or bus stops. And I think that is so interesting because it's just like you're saying, people aren't necessarily coming up to these spaces with the intention to learn, but they're these really fun, interactive, interfaces. And so then they end up learning in the public space, right? Like reshaping what these, and let me be clear, people learn a lot in those public spaces. As somebody who had to take the bus in LA when I was little in third grade, I learned a lot at the bus stop. Okay. Was it air quality information? Maybe, probably not. But so I do think it's like really interesting, like how designers think about like putting informational or educational materials into public places like that. Like that is very impressive to me, and I think like has a huge impact. Okay, did you all have a?
I'll just say a little bit about design principles. I think we had a slide that did talk about how like not school kind of thing, but really, I mean, I think we all saw that when we were interacting with the teens, that they want games, playfulness, hands-on crafting, like basically fun stuff that, by the way, it's about data kind of thing, that was very much, driving what in terms of how we design things and how it ran. The other thing is, I think we were thinking in terms of like there was a lot of making, but from our perspective, it was like critical making, and to really engage critical making, the conversations that we had were really, really important. And we were kind of trying to be thoughtful about, what kind of prompts might bring teens to start thinking critically about data. And I will say that because we did so much of this online, the chat was really, really critical. And Mark and Irene were in the chat because I was on the video, and they really preferred, because that's their medium. They really liked being in the chat, and there were some really interesting critical conversations about data. But it was like using the right prompts as we created and talked about data was, I think, the discourse, thinking about the discourse is really, really important.
Yeah, it's absolutely like making sure that you are, I don't want to keep repeating the phrase designing, but designing is it's also about like the words and the phrases you use, right? And like what is coded explicitly or implicitly as scientific or relevant, right? Or appropriate for the space. Um, hmm. Okay, both of you, those responses made me think the solution aspects to these programs, right? So in both, there's like a problem posing that's happening, right? Like, what's something that's interesting to you? What's a problem you want to solve in your community? How do we use data to tell this story? Um, Also, like, okay, I learned that the AQI is this number. Okay, like, and that it's more than just knowing that number and being aware that, okay, at this point, I can't individually, I shouldn't go outside. But how do we move that to a collective, like, agency where there are solutions posed? And I heard a couple come up of like, when you're thinking about, maybe your local politicians or you're thinking about whatever it is, right? How do you all, is that intentionally designed in? Is it something that's, you know, if there are, do they, I guess I'm trying to say, do you all also talk explicitly about their options to like enact this knowledge in their everyday lives? Or is that kind of like left up to, if they decide to?
I think in our sessions that were about civic data, and then we asked them to design activities themselves. I'll just tell you a couple of them that were about taking action. One was an idea was this would be like a library activity, share eviction data with the community, then organize a letter writing activity to contact politicians. That was one. Another suggestion or design, if you will, a community improvement park project for a park based on New York City park crime statistics, because we looked at that, right? So they definitely, they were not librarians. They don't know how this would work in a public library, but it could be. It could be. But they definitely wanted to take action based on data that they had looked at and interrogated.
Yeah, for ours, the reason we let them choose a topic of whatever they wanted. So they do a big brainstorming session. So the teacher has some categories and like, okay, what kind of data sets do we think might be available about crime? And then they all do post-it notes and they put them up and then they can go and choose their data set from that. So that is intended to help them practice asking questions that could be answered with data so that they can be able to ask those questions later. And then we have the public presentation that sometimes their principal comes or other teachers from the school or their parents come to like see what they've been doing all week. And the goal is that then they can feel more empowered to, these are the kids who are in communities data where data is being used to tell stories about them. And our main goal is to try to flip the script and let them say like, okay, here's my data, here's my experience, here's my presentation to you. So we really talk about storytelling with data and about communicating effectively. And that's why the DPP framework is so important part of the curriculum so that they have that as a tool to go back and be like, okay, are you following conventions here? Conventions is one of the things that was hardest to get across to them. Like if you're talking about voting data and you represent Democratic votes as yellow, nobody's going to know what you're talking about. Like you need to be, follow what your audience expects and those sorts of decisions. We're trying to make it so they have the tools if they decide to use them.
That's so cool. Um, I just had another question and it like blew away. It was something about, oh, did you put the framework in the chat or did somebody put I want to make sure that I saved it before this panel because I
The
was like,
DPP framework.
yeah,
It's so
like a worksheet.
I put the link to our current site, which does have some worksheets on it. Those are not the final versions. We're working on those. They will
Okay.
be ready this summer, but there is something there, and I will happily add the slides up there as well after this.
I'm always trying to get pedagogical resources and whatnot. Okay. If there, here's the last chance, y'all. Does anybody have any questions? A little bit of time. To the comment in the chat about Anaheim. I believe that is the link. Playful learning. Here's one. Playful learning landscapes. I always forget what they call them. Yeah, playful learning landscapes. And they have a bunch. And I think they've left just Anaheim. Well, they're still in Anaheim, but they've expanded beyond just Anaheim and now they're in all kinds of places. So, yeah, check that out as well. There's just so many good ideas, and that's why I'm really appreciative for this type of like webinar because I think it's almost like there's a fire hose of information at all times. Um, so many publications coming out, and the main venue is reading somebody's publication, you know? And so I find that there are so many projects that are of interest to me, and I just never knew that they were out there, you know, unless we happened to bump into each other at a conference. So I love this like type of 8 to 12 minutes visuals. I feel like I learned so much. So thank you all for coming. Um, Valeria, I think we are going to do our closing slides. And then Kim, did you want to go ahead and?
You want to do the poll first?
Yes. So do you have the link?
I'll just launch the poll.
Oh, I always think it's the other one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, y'all, we have a poll. And this is our topics poll. And so, we are trying to design webinars that are based on you all's interests and find projects that are related. That's how we got this group today, right? Y'all were very interested in data literacy. And so we brought in experts in data literacy, right? It's like the Burger King, you can have it your way. So go ahead and fill out the poll. Tell us what topics you're interested in hearing about, seeing about, learning about next, so that we can continue to design this to be somewhere you want to be. And if there are ideas that aren't listed on here, you can just add it in the chat. Oh, and if you're interested in presenting, right, this is an option, Kim. If you have a project that's in informal science and you're interested in presenting, please let us know. We're always looking for folks to come and teach us.
Okay, great. So we just want to give a final thank you to all of our great presenters today. But before we wrap up the session completely, we wanted to invite you to please help the Revise Center enhance the development of our future sessions by completing this brief survey. It's a pretty short survey, it should take about 10 minutes or less, and we'll be including it in an email following up from the session. But your participation in the survey is entirely voluntary and your responses will be kept confidential. We'll pause for a brief moment just to share the link that's on the screen, and one of my colleagues will also paste the link in the Zoom chat. So again, regardless of your role, experience, or involvement with the Revise Center, we welcome your feedback and input. And then as a reminder to those of you who may not know, the Revise Center offers access to thousands of peer-reviewed articles and reference resources published in a wide variety of education research journals through EBSCO. So if you have not already signed up for our free EBSCO access, you can do so by completing the quick form. That's the link on the slide. But again, one of my colleagues will paste the link in the Zoom chat. This is free EBSCO access, by the way, guys. So just short form, and we'll share those details with you.
Can I just say this is like a super dope resource because if you are not affiliated with like a university or an institution that pays for these journals to access, this is great because you get this free access and then you can access all of those journals. I do this all the time. Please use this.
Yeah, thank you, Tara. And finally, we just wanted to invite you all to visit our website and follow us on socials for the latest Revised Center updates and happenings in the informal STEM education field. Um, this concludes our session today, so thank you all so much for joining us.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
May 18th for part 2.